When the day of Pentecost came, they were all together in one place. Suddenly, a sound like the blowing of a violent wind came from heaven and filled the whole house where they were sitting. They saw what seemed to be tongues of fire that separated and came to rest on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit, began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit enabled them. Now they were staying in Jerusalem, God-fearing Jews from every nation under heaven. When they heard this sound, a crowd came together in bewilderment because each one heard them speaking in his own language. Utterly amazed, they asked, "Are not all these men who are speaking Galileans? Then how is it that each of us hears them in his own native language? Parthians, Medes, Elamites, residents of Mesopotamia, Judea, Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt and the parts of Libya near Cyrene, visitors from Rome, both Jews and converts to Judaism, Cretans and Arabs, we hear them declaring the wonders of God in our own tongues." Amazed and perplexed, they asked one another, "What does this mean?" Some, however, made fun of them and said, they've had too much wine. Okay. So what do you see here, Tapillo? Well, this is it. This is the power. This is what we were just talking about, the Holy Spirit. But you know what, Dr. Drew, this is where I feel like these guys who talk about this speaking in tongues nonsense, this is what they need to read. Because tongues, it was they could understand it. These were languages. It says here in verse 6, they heard him speaking in his own language. It wasn't gibberish, right? Exactly, Tapillo. Exactly. So when people talk about that's not biblical. It's not. Do you see it? And so you see here, it was sudden, right? Power came down from on high. They saw what seemed to be like tongues of fire on their heads. I mean, when people talk about speaking in tongues, is that what you see? Do you see tongues of fire on people's heads? As a like all this stuff. Do you see that? No, you don't. Right? And so you see here, it was like, this is so cool, Tapello. You've heard of like the United Nations, right? Yeah. That thing in New York, right? Where all the countries come together and they come together to discuss like, international issues. Exactly. So, when they all go there, right? They have to put on their headphones, right? And they have a translator that translates what the guy up front is saying in their own language, right? So this is cool. It's almost like the day of Pentecost right here. It's like the UN without headphones. Is that awesome? Like they were able to understand what each other was saying without any kind of translation. So the apostles here were able, like by the miracle, be able to speak languages they never studied. Is that amazing? It's like the reverse of the Tower of Babel, when God confused it. Now he's like allowing it to everyone to understand it. It's like amazing, right? And so, good, Tapello. So, this is intense because now people are thinking, man, these guys drunk or something? But guess what happens? Guess what happens? In verse 14, look what it says here. Then Peter stood up with the 11, raised his voice and addressed the crowd. Fellow Jews and all you who live in Jerusalem, let me explain this to you. Listen carefully to what I say. These men are not drunk as you suppose. It's only 9 a.m. Wow. Okay, so we see here that this was happening around 9 a.m. Maybe that's why, businesses start at 9 a.m. So many things are cool, biblical. I wonder about that sometimes. It's pretty cool. But the point of it is now remember, Jesus had the keys. Sorry, Peter had the keys, right? And so now let's see what Peter has to say. He tells them that this was actually a prophecy from the prophet Joel, that the Holy Spirit will come down. It's pretty awesome here. Let's pick it up in verse 22. And let's see what Peter has to say to the people.